So you recently wrote an article published in Baptist News, how John MacArthur loves the Bible but not his neighbor. It seems like it's a good segue from what you were just saying. Tell us about this article
Yeah.
and what led you to writing it.
So one thing this journey has done for me, it's helped me to see how certain theologies have shaped our affections and even our social policies. And so just to be upfront, one thing that I would say my theology has gone to is a view of Christian universalism that is very consistent with like an Ilaria Ramelli, a David Bentley Hart way of looking at things. And David Bentley Hart talks about how, like, if you believe in eternal conscious torment, view of hell, or even annihilationism, like at some point that becomes incompatible with loving your neighbor, because at some point you cannot love them as you love yourself whenever that moment of judgment comes. And so when I looked at MacArthur and what he's doing with this coronavirus stuff, he was using this theology of eternal conscious torment and saying, because people are going to be burning in hell forever, we have to stay open, and we have to have 7,000 people in our church services unmasked and so unsocially distanced, because we got to save these people from that, which is kind of ironic since he's a Calvinist. But I began to see how this theology that he had was shaping his inability to love his neighbor, because he was putting them in harm's way. And he was actually in that article, I have some quotes there where he's dismissing people who are concerned about their health, because you got to save them from the eternity of hell. And so I just wanted to point that out. And so that's really where the article came in.
He also takes a cheap shot at Andy Stanley, I think.
Yeah.
Because Andy Stanley made the opposite decision to forego any in-person services until the beginning of next year. And it seems like that side of the table gives you the binary of either you're a faithful Christian or you're a fearful Christian, and takes away the option that you just mentioned, that no, maybe we're doing it because we love our neighbor. And as a guest of ours that we had not long ago, Denise Murphy-Plichta said, as she's an epidemiologist and a theologian, when asked if when she's going back to church, she said, not till I'm vaccinated, because I would hate to be the one who infected somebody 2 pews away and they died from it. So it doesn't seem like that kind of dichotomous thinking gives any room for you to say, no, I'm not doing it out of fear. I'm doing it because I love my neighbor.
Yeah. And I've heard from some actually pretty well-known pastors that have come to me privately and said, we really appreciate your article. We've read it to our staff and stuff, and so while I'm getting lambasted publicly for it, obviously, I'm being told I'm a stay-at-home dad, so who do I think I am to, correct a theologian and everything? But that's kind of just more revealing about where they're at, so.
Well, Neil Postman's seminal work, Amusing Ourselves to Death, he posits in that work, the sociologist Neil Postman, he basically says that the problem with America isn't that that Bart Simpson influences us. It's that Nightline does. In other words, that Bart Simpson isn't a threat to us. It's that we take too seriously what presents itself as serious news. In a way, you see that in the Christian tribes. In other words, it's plucking the low-hanging fruit to pick on Jerry Falwell Jr. right now. And I see an eagerness for people to come out and take their shots at the clown show that's happening in Virginia. And yet there is, other than your article, a great silence when it comes to John MacArthur, who I would argue is probably a much greater threat to bringing shame on the Lord's name and on his church than somebody like Jerry Falwell Jr. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where it's really tough because, I feel like these things need to be drawn attention to. I brought some stuff out about Jerry Falwell Jr. before everything hit the fan. And I haven't really piled on as much since then because it's like, oh my goodness, this is like way more than we ever expected. And I think it's tough because, you wonder, like, with social media, like how negative can you possibly be? And for me, like, it really comes down to like loving your neighbor as yourself. Like, I believe that at the very heart of who we are, we need to love our neighbors ourselves, and we need to do that forever. And that is who God is. And God's posture toward us is always going to be loving his neighbor as himself, loving your enemies. That's what we've been called to. And that's going to extend for eternity. And when there are people like a Falwell or MacArthur who are going against that, there comes a point where it needs to be pointed out when it becomes a health risk, when people are actually potentially dying from this. And so that's kind of a struggle for me, is wondering, people don't realize that the reason I'm doing this is from a posture of loving my neighbor as myself. And I feel for people who are in bondage to their theology and the fear and the terror that they have, and whose physical bodies are being hurt and their minds are being hurt in so many different ways, with shame and trauma, when it's just so unnecessary. And so I do think they need to be called out at times for that.